and a huge warm welcome today to recap the podcast. Now, today is a slightly different type of episode that we're doing. Anyone who's been listening previously to our previous series, you'll know that normally we kind of have a one-to-one conversation with an individual. A couple of times we've had two individuals on. Today, it will be the first time that we are having a whole team of people coming on to speak to you today. We don't have just one guest. We don't have just two guests. We have 7 individuals on today. So I hope you're prepared to listen to a lot of expertise and a lot of wonderful conversation about something that's happening right now in the early years sector that is really, really special. Our guests today are going to tell us more about the wonderful work that they are doing within the field of health, nutrition, and our early years. So I would love to hand over firstly to my guests to give a brief introduction to who they are and how they're involved in this wonderful project. So I will hand over to you guys.
Hi, Lucy. Thanks so much for having us on. We are really delighted to be here. My name is Dr. Kay Ehrenwicks. I'm Head of School for Education at Anglia Ruskin University, and I'm the lead researcher on the Nourishing Our Future project. I will hand over to Emily.
Thank you, Kay. Hi, Lucy. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. I'm Emily. I'm a public health manager at Essex County Council. So my role involves everything to do with health, food, nutrition, and obesity across the county of Essex. I'm also a registered nutritionist, so love this type of work and have loved working on Nourishing Our Future. I've been the lead commissioner for this project, which means that we funded the work and have, with Kay and all the amazing team, led us through the last couple of years. I'll hand over to Susie.
Hi, I'm Susie Threadgold. I work for Essex County Council. I'm one of the Children's Community Development Leads, and my role is all about the early years sector, access to all the early years settings, and the wonderful work they're doing out there. I come from an early years background, so it's an absolute joy to bring food into that field. So yeah, it's been brilliant from the start, and really excited to share it with you.
Hi everyone, I'm Mitzi and I'm the research assistant on the Nourishing Our Future project. So I've been working with settings to recruit them, and throughout the data collection, it's been really exciting to work with everyone on the project. I will hand over to Stacey.
Hello everybody, my name's Stacey Randall and I'm a senior lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University. So I course lead on the Montessori degree and the BA Honours Early Childhood Studies. So I've always had a passion in food and nutrition, and actually did some research myself when I was studying around this area. So when I got invited to be part of the research team, I jumped at the chance because it's absolutely fantastic to be involved and be working with our settings, our parents' settings, children, and to find out what was happening in Essex when it comes to food and looking at nourishing the futures. I'm going to hand over to Sanjoy.
So I'm a researcher in nutrition and exercise science quite broadly, and bring my nutrition expertise to this project. I have a baby who's the same age as NOF, so nutrition for early years has taken over my life in all senses, and looking forward to talking about it.
Thanks, Sanjoy. Hi, Lucy. Hi, everybody. My name's Dr. Michelle Hawkins, and I wear 2 hats, one as a faculty director of learning, teaching and assessment, and one as a senior lecturer in public health nutrition. Similar to Sanjoy, delighted to be part of this project, bringing in nutritional expertise within the project, but also a real personal interest, having an 8-year-old and looking at the experiences that she received as a young child, and also the challenges that I faced as a parent, and also looking at the dynamics of how we are supporting not only our individuals working within the early years sector, but also our parents and our children as our real key stakeholders within this research. So absolutely delighted to be part of this project and part of this podcast today.
Amazing, thank you. I think that is everyone. Wave at me if you haven't had a chance to speak. Do you know what I absolutely love about this is not just the wide array of expertise that you all bring in all different areas of this, but actually your personal interest in this, your personal drive, those of you that are parents, that drive to want to do better with our early years and to actually take that back into your own homes as well. And I'm a parent as well, and my child is, well, she's an adult now. I don't know if I can call her a child. But but it's still, you know, that parenting responsibility to want to support and make sure that the early years for our friends, our families, our colleagues and the people around us have access to the right information. So I love that about this project, and I get so excited when I see the updates come up on all of my social medias, because I can see the momentum that this project has, and I think it's incredible. So I want to take you back right to the beginning and talk about the kind of the commissioning of this project. Like, where did it come from? What motivated Essex County Council to commission this project with ARU in the first place?
Thanks, Lucy. It feels like a lifetime ago, and it's only a year and a half, which is just wild. So back in July 2024, we in ECC, so Essex County Council, had recently launched our healthy weight strategy. So that's like a document that sets out what we want to achieve for food, nutrition and weight across the county. So what do we want to focus on? What types of people and groups do we want to particularly support? And what's kind of our best role as a council public health team and our system partners like the NHS, schools, nurseries? What can we all do to make a real difference? So that was launched in April in 2024. And within that, there was a priority recommended to focus on children and young people, because we see increasingly high challenges, obesity prevalence, but also to focus on early years settings, because we see that they are great places to introduce healthy habits and behaviours and have that teaching. So that was launched in April alongside other priorities. And we were allocated some of our public health grant to basically deliver the strategy and implement things to recommend and improve practice. So I thought, let's start with the early years. Let's kind of think of that life course approach. But I thought, we don't actually know what is going on in the early years to do with food. We don't know what the children are eating. We don't know what the settings are, how they feel about it. Are they confident in food? Are they anxious about it? We don't know how parents feel about early years nutrition in Essex. So I researched what other literature was out there, and there wasn't much. There were some studies that had looked at lunchboxes versus like nursery food, but it was a bit mixed about what the nutrition was like. There was a bit of evidence that said that setting staff felt a bit unconfident with food, but it was really limited, and there was nothing in Essex. So I thought, before we think about what we need to do, we need to see what's going on in the first place. So I wrote a sheet. It's called a specification for tender of different things that I wanted to find out. I met Susie the first time in education, and because I thought, I'm coming at this from public health and nutrition. I've never worked in the early years. I don't have children. I didn't even know at the time what the different setting types were, that there's preschools, nurseries and childminders. I didn't know any of that. So Susie helped me and her team in education. So together we wrote the specification for what we were looking for. That was about July time. We put that out to tender. So we wanted different companies to come forward and say, I fancy that, I can do that, I've got the skills to do that. And we listed what we needed, like we needed good academic rigor, we needed people that had experience of early years and nutrition, like everything that we needed. We got some great applications. It was a really competitive procurement that Susie, myself and another colleague, Carolyn in public health, all scored, and ARU won. So they just demonstrated such a passion. They came up with the name Nourishing Our Future, which was a real standout from their application over others, because they'd given it an identity and it was a thing, which is rare sometimes in commissioning. We then awarded the contract in August 24. It was only until the end of March, because I wanted it to be done quite quickly, so then we knew what we needed to do differently. So I know it was a really ambitious time scale, and I'm sure the team will talk to that. But the purpose was really just to see what the current status is and what more needs to be done and what's already working well. So then come April, we know what to do differently. So that's how it came about.
It's so funny, isn't it? Like, I was laughing then when you were saying about the time frame, because as a researcher myself, I'm very aware that we want to do so much when it comes to research, but when you're giving a short time frame, you kind of think, oh my goodness, what can I get done in that's going to be really meaningful? I mean, Kay, you're the lead researcher from Anglia Ruskin's side. What was it like for you kind of seeing that commission out there and thinking, yes, I want to go for it? How did that process look?
Hi, Lucy. Yeah, it was really exciting, especially as well for us because it was local. It was an opportunity to work with early years settings in Essex. And Essex is really diverse. As a county, it's huge. There are 1,300 different settings in Essex. And as Emily mentioned, that comprises day nurseries, childminders, preschools. So obviously we as a team already knew that this would be a really interesting area of practice to look at across those different types of settings, because we had that kind of lived experience. I was a childminder, that lived experience of what food looks like in our settings and the challenges around that and the opportunities for that and how important it is. So this was an exciting project to bid for, but also knowing that this is an area of practice that has never really been researched before. Food has quite often been seen as kind of, the break, the invisible area of practice. We finish our learning and then we go and eat and then we come back to it. And so this was something that we knew that we would be able to explore in a creative way a bit more and really listen to those voices.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you already have an idea in terms of what team you wanted to put together for this project? How does it work building a team around a commission like that?
Yeah, it was fabulous. So I didn't know half of these people before Nourishing Our Future. Of course, some of the people in my own school. But the important thing for this, and the crux of this project, is it's interdisciplinary. Food is health, nutrition, education, early years. There are so many different aspects of it. So this was the most important thing about building a team around this project, is that we had all of those different expertise. As much as I understand early years, I know nothing about food. I'm not a nutritionist. I had to learn as I went on this topic, as we all do. So it was wonderful to have the opportunity to reach out. This project sits across 3 different schools in 3 different faculties at ARU, and that's quite unique for us as a research group. We all are able to bring our own experiences and expertise to the project. And in terms of research methodologies as well, we all have different experiences of research. We've done it in different ways. We have different passions about different ways to engage other people. And so we were able to bring that all together. And at the heart of that was the voice of the early years educators and the children and the parents.
Yeah, I absolutely love that about this project, that it isn't just academics coming together and trying to tell the sector what they should know. It's having the sector involved, and we'll come on to talk about that involvement in a little while, because that they are really involved. This really is a collaboration within the sector and for the sector, isn't it? Which I absolutely love. You touched upon there that you're bringing in lots of different expertise within different schools and departments within ARU. I mean, the rest of the research team, whereabouts in Anglia Ruskin do you work, and how does that help bringing that into the research?
So Lucy, as I said, I sit within the Faculty of Health, Education, Social Care and Medicine, and I've really expanded in terms of working more interdisciplinary across programme areas. So one of the attributes that I feel that I've brought to the team in terms of background is the more interdisciplinary approach that's required in terms of how we approach food, nutrition and public health, and it not just sitting in silo. And as Kay alluded to, this spoke volumes to me around how we bring this together. And I think from the health perspective, yes, there's that acknowledgement there, but it's also thinking about my own experience within course delivery, thinking about working with different populations, different age groups, and also thinking about the different perspectives that each of these stakeholder groups has to bring. And I think it's so paramount, those voices. So the lived experience and voice of my previous research I felt would be really important to add to this, but also the fact that I wear different hats within my two job roles. So one, thinking about those aspects of learning, teaching and how we work with people, but also the kind of more discipline perspective in terms of how we feed that into society in a way that one can engage with it in an effective capacity.
Absolutely. And I can really identify with that, wearing multiple hats. It's something that I do. And I feel like I'm always saying to people, yes, I do lots of different things, but it all feeds in. It all feeds into the main kind of goal, the main mission that you're on. And I feel like that really resonates with what you're saying. You know, there are skills, there are expertise sets that you have from each different type of thing that you do, but it all feeds into growing that big main mission. And I think it just gives it that edge when you have lots of different perspectives and lots of different people's experiences, and also lots of different people's motivations as to why they're involved in something like this. I think that's what gives research projects the edge, is when you have people's different motivations and passions fed into it. Sanjoy, how about you? How has your experience been?
Yeah, so I guess I came into this being, 60% of my research is lab-based. I'm very much get people into the lab. We test various nutritional interventions and see how effective they are in a range of different types of people. So it was great to come out of the lab and actually do something that actually has meaningful. I can see the tangible effect of what we've done on the other side, and that ability to work with people from different expertise and different backgrounds really is, I think we've said this a few times, has made this project really unique, because to be able to have a meaningful effect within the project team, you need to have people who have lived that experience. You know, we've got people who worked in childcare and had experienced that, and then bringing the theoretical nutrition mixed with the practical aspects together has made this work really well, I think, overall.
I think that's a really interesting spin of having somebody on the team that is quite lab-based, and it's really not a lab-based type project. It's that real kind of getting out there and that collaboration and being involved in that. So I'm guessing as well, by the sounds of it, not only is the team and the research project doing something great for the sector, but actually I'm guessing you guys are learning a lot yourselves about different things that you may not necessarily day to day have that experience with. So that kind of double-edged learning and education side of things, I think is really magical. Stacey, you work in the early years side of education at ARU, don't you? So I'm guessing you bring in a lot of that early years knowledge to the project.
I was absolutely delighted when Kay first approached me and asked for some ideas, my thinking. I deliver one of the modules for the last few years called Play, Health and Wellbeing, which really does look at the benefits. So I've got that academic background, but also the passion from my own studies. My mum was a a school cook, and in schools years ago. So that history, it's always been something I've been interested by. So when Kay approached and I was having the conversations, I was basing it on quite a history really of like we've said, we've all brought with our children, things like that, but also our students in the classroom, they were telling me much before we even got was awarded this research contract around what was happening in their settings, the challenges, what was working well, the fact that there wasn't kind of much around. We'd already had the benefits, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, around Taste Ed coming in and doing talks for our students, and students giving first-hand accounts in the module evaluation surveys about the impact that this was having on them. So I knew that there's definitely a need for this. So to actually then be invited to be involved and be able to bring my knowledge and expertise and learn so much from others. We've really been critical, we've really challenged each other, and it was a really quick time frame. I'm not going to lie, when we found out we had it, and then I know we're going to talk about it as we go on about what we did, but just thinking about how do you get that typical day, it's that was really important, and the methodological approach and methods that we chose. We went backwards and forwards as a team as how that would work best to really capture that voice and work with people, in a really tight frame. What we've turned around is absolutely incredible. I didn't even believe it was possible, but I am so proud of where we're at in a short amount of time, and the trajectory it's taken. It's been absolutely incredible.
Anything is possible, Stacey, when we put our minds to it. Even those really short time frames that people throw at us, we just got to get our heads down and do it. And what a wonderful collaborative team you are, and you've got it done and some. And we'll go on to talk about that more. Mitzi, you're the research assistant on the project. How has your experience been coming into this? Is this kind of your first experience of coming into research like this? What's that been like?
Yeah, hi Lucy. So yes, I've done some research in the past, but definitely not as exciting as NOF. Obviously, throughout my undergraduate degree, I always had an interest in how foundational the early years were in later life. So my research looked around how early literacy was important and how it led to outcomes in later life. So doing this, it's quite similar, because now instead of looking at literacy, I'm looking at food and how that has outcomes in later life. So there's definitely some similarities going on, but similar to Kay, I had to sort of learn about the nutrition side of things, and it's been really important and collaborative to work with such a great team. So yeah, it's definitely been a great project to be a part of, and it's continuing to expand and evolve. And the early years sector to work with, they've been great. They've been very forthcoming, and a unique thing about this research is that they've been so open with us, and it's been like a great part of the research to just, yeah, it's been such a highlight already, and it's definitely been great.
Oh, that's really good to hear. And hopefully this won't be your first kind of foray into this type of research, and it goes on for years and years and years, and you can build a wonderful career out of it. Either that, or it will stress you out lots and lots, because us researchers get really, really stressed, and this will be the last one that you do. I'm sure it won't be, though.
No, definitely not.
Susie, this is the first of its kind, as I keep seeing when we're seeing it online, about the first of its kind type of research project. And what a wonderful thing to have a collaboration between Essex County Council and Anglia Ruskin on this. What's it been like for you guys over at ECC working on a project like this and handing out those really short deadlines to keep everyone on their toes?
The scale of it has just been huge. We quite often do like small projects, little testing things, but from the minute Emily came and said, right, we want to really look into this and recognise that gap, it was like, we're going to do the whole county. We're going to do all 1,300 settings at the same time and reach out to everybody. And that's what's been really exciting. And what's been brilliant about working with ARU is they've approached this with such sensitivity. Food is so emotive, and yet they came knowing the sector, knowing the burden, knowing the pressures on the sector in early years and the funding and all those problems that early years face, and then still went in really delicately going, we want you to take on some extra work, and this is what it's going to be. And that because of that sensitivity, the whole sector just rallied behind it. You know, they gave them a voice, and by God did they use it. They're like, yes, we want to tell you this. And I'm sure we'll come on to a bit later, but yeah, it's been so well received.
That's brilliant. It's relationships, isn't it? I think that's what it comes back down to as well. Not just the relationships between like the settings and the people that you're speaking to for the research, but actually the relationships within the research team and within that collaboration between the two big organisations as well. And, you know, everything, when we think back to anything that we do in life, relationships are at the core of it, aren't they? So I can tell already just by how you're all speaking, the interactions between you, the things that I see on social media, it's a great relationship that you guys have all got between one another. And I think that's really a testament to why this has been so successful and why it is absolutely blown up in such a short amount of time. Clearly, it was needed. So you've definitely hit on something here. So for anyone listening unfamiliar with Nourishing Our Future or the core aim of what this programme and research is about, who did you talk to? What did you do? How did you gather the information? What is Nourishing Our Future?
That is a big question, Lucy.
I'm going to sit back and just listen now.
I'll start off. So the aim of Nourishing Our Future was to explore food, and that kind of sounds quite vague, and we wanted it to be vague because, as I said before, this is not really something that has been looked at before, and it certainly hasn't been looked at across the diversity of different types of settings. And so we wanted to be able to make sure that day nurseries, preschools and childminders, who all operate very, very differently, but under the same guidelines and with the same purpose, had an opportunity to tell us what food and nutrition looked like in their settings. Childminders are single practitioners who work from their own home. So the children come to their home and will eat as part of a family. Childminders will use their own kitchen in their home-based setting. Preschools are slightly different and they will often use community spaces. So they might be operating out of a village hall or somewhere on site that doesn't even have a kitchen. So how do you provide food in that way? And then day nurseries are more traditionally your purpose-built buildings that will very often have a kitchen, or they'll have an external catering company that come in. And so from that kind of basis, we knew that we needed a project that didn't have too much of a focused objective of tell us this. It needed to have a broad, what is it that you do? What does food look like in your setting? How do you feel about food? How do your children feel about food? What are your routines like? How do you provide it? All of those kind of big questions, so that we could explore it in more depth. And it's why the research was designed using lots of different methods. So we gave the settings lots of different ways to tell us in different formats. So, we did like quite a traditional online survey that gave everyone an opportunity to come in and answer a load of questions. And then we offered them opportunities to join us and meet us in workshops, so that they weren't just answering questions on a spreadsheet. They became part of our team then, and we all got to know each other, and it was a much more humanised approach. And then we asked them if they would like to become the researchers and go back into their settings and take photos of what the food looks like and their activities and the education and around food that they do. So that's kind of an overview, a very quick overview of some of the ways that we engage the settings to be able to talk to us about food and nutrition, and to be able to tell us how broad this is, because it's not just about consumption, it's also about education, and they are quite big areas to look at.
Can I just add as well, Lucy, whilst I wasn't in the direct research team for the methods, what struck me the most about the research, amongst many things, was how it was framed. And I think Susie touched on this earlier. I think that's what made one of the reasons why it was so successful and continues to be, and the sector have continued to engage, is because it was framed in such a positive, collaborative, compassionate, inclusive way. Those buzzwords are so common, but they're not often used in public sector work, in research, in, we say co-production, but this really was, it wasn't an audit, it wasn't a baseline or an assessment, it was a talk to us, tell us what are you doing well, what are you celebrating. It was really compassionate and supportive for the sector, and that is why I think there were 207 responses. It's a phenomenal response from the sector. All really busy people in a sector that's so stretched at a busy time of year. It was autumn and spring, so really everyone was busy, but they wanted to get behind it because they saw it as important, and they felt supported by the team, and therefore are continuing to be engaged, as I'm sure we'll talk about later. So I think the team did such a great job of that, and therefore built trust with the sector that is hard to do, I think, sometimes.
I think as well, building on from that, the title Nourishing Our Future has really captured people's hearts, and that people remember Change for Life, and there's something about that. And even though that's then gone on and changed over time, people still refer back to it. It's really interesting for me around how Kay led the branding. That's been so significant because people can relate to it, children get on board with it, parents recognise it, and I really do think that's been we need to look at that. You can see our backgrounds, there's something about that fun and bringing it to it, and not doing it to people, doing it with people, getting views, opinions, and people were asking us to participate. We, as well as what Kay's already explained, we had parents contacting us saying could they be involved. It was and whilst we had autumn and spring, we had to actually get the report finalised, ready for that first conference. So, to actually undertake all of that different type of research and collate that and get them produced ready for the first conference in March was incredible and such a success. And, for me, when we got to that point with the conference, I was just so overwhelmed with what we'd achieved as a team in such a short amount of time. And I've learned so much from my colleagues. Sandra pointed out there was fish missing. I'm not sure from the pictures I would have noticed those things, but all of the time, though, the photos, for me, the photo capture was so powerful, so powerful. But again, we had to think about like the timings that we were doing things, how we'd go about it. You know, we didn't just want to get like all turkey dinners being the time of year that it was. So a lot of thought went into making sure that we was getting a typical day on a plate for children. And, you know, actually there was some fantastic there's fantastic things going on. This is the thing, you know, it's not about like what's not happening, it's about showcasing all of the good things that are happening, and then looking at, because we really didn't know what was going to come out of it. So as things were coming in, I think one of the most emotional days for me, and I can still remember it, was a Friday afternoon when I was going through all of the pictures. 749 pictures we received. We never expected to have such an impressive, like, we'd like said like about how they had to be set up. I don't know if Kay's going to talk a little bit about that, you know, going forward. I think it'd be helpful for people to understand that. But just seeing those pictures, you know, you could feel it, you know, for so many different reasons. And that's when I realised how different our youngest children, our babies, toddlers and young children, their experiences of like where they're in settings, how different it is across Essex, you know, and that will be the same across the whole country. You know, I think what it really highlighted was how different each child's typical day looks like.
Lucy, could I just come in at that point? Because I think one of the things that what really evolved, and going back to this point about interdisciplinarity, was the fact that it was the first time from some of the experiences we were receiving that the collaborative approach and feeling listened to, and it not feeling that they were being dictated to, I think was what really strengthened this work, because there was that automatic connection of, you're not just an academic, but you are, in my case, you're a parent as well. And I think because of that diverseness, we also got the diverseness in that response and that collaboration back. And I think for me, the big eye-opener in all of this is that in order to look at the real world problems we're trying to solve, trying to do that with a single disciplinary approach just isn't effective. And I think that sense of feeling listened to but not judged from the parent perspective, but also the early years educators' perspectives, was fundamental. And it is why it's such a joy to be part of, because there's such an inclusive approach. The methodologies being diverse and meeting the needs of the actual stakeholders involved was so important, because somebody might not engage particularly well literacy wise with a questionnaire, so having workshops, giving them opportunity to talk to people, but in an environment where they felt a sense of belonging. And I think that's something I'm sure I generalize here, but speak very openly, that as a team we feel we've created a sense of identity, but also that perspective of a safe, inclusive, belonging sense in terms of environment for the sector.
I think that's a really important point, because one of the core aim, I suppose, and I alternate between whether I call Nourishing Our Future research or a project. The reason I do that is because ultimately it's both, because the difference, the additional aspect that makes it a project is that when you design research that's beneficial for the people that are taking part. And, you know, we had won this contract and we were doing this research together with Essex County Council. We had clear indicators and outcomes and objectives and deliverables that we needed to meet. And they're our deliverables. They're not the settings deliverables. Why do they care about, you know, what our contract is with Essex County Council? What they care about is how this benefits them. What taking part in a research project, how does that support them? And so we needed to make sure that the way that the research was designed was beneficial for the settings. It gave them something to be a part of. It gave them a community to come together to talk about, you know, an area of practice that they don't have a chance to talk about before, that they were experiencing lots of challenges with, but also to give them opportunities to share good practice with each other. And they do that so well. And they don't have many opportunities to come together and tell each other what they're doing. They all work a bit like schools. They all work individually in their own settings. They don't have opportunities to come together. Even providing, you know, that is something that was built into this research project, so that they had opportunities to talk to each other just as much as they were talking to us. And then they they were able to go away, not from things that we'd taught them or told them or anything, but from things that they had shared with each other. And that's a real strength of the sector, because there is so much good practice out there. It's they need more opportunities to be able to share that.
But I think that's what you were able to do really well. Oh, sorry, who did I? We might be saying the same thing. I was just going to congratulate the team for how you made the research really practical as well. So not only did you do a great analysis and overview of kind of what's already going on, but you did a great job of identifying what else could be done and what the opportunities were. That made it then really helpful for us to then commission new schemes, work together with you and the sector to develop, well, the NOF award, which we'll talk about later, but really practical things as a result of the research that, again, doesn't always happen. There might be an amazing comprehensive piece of research and piece of understanding that's brilliant, but then what's the so what happens as a result? What looks differently in practice, and what improves things that we've been able to do with NOF together, research really into practice.
That's almost exactly what I was going to say, is that from the beginning it was that sense of ownership that you gave the sector, that we were going to do something on the back of this. There would be an output that they could tell us what they wanted to happen, and they could own that and own the research and tell us, and then we would make it happen. And that's where that next steps and what's gone on after the research has been so well informed, and that proper co-production is because you gave them that ownership right from the start, that they would be feeding into something that would happen. We weren't going to dictate to them, this is what you're going to do. You're going to tell us what you want to do.
I think coming back to, one of the questions was, how is this research first of its kind? Because a lot of people have undertaken this work of looking at food and lunchboxes in various settings. It was the brand that was created, and the settings became our research partners. They're our collaborators, and that's what really made what we're doing unique. And I think a lot of community-based public health research can probably benefit from this type of approach in various other sectors as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you demonstrate really well that co-production element of what you're doing. Co-productive research and collaborative research can really easily fall foul to just being tokenistic. Yes, we're working collaboratively with X, Y, and Z. Yes, we're co-producing this resource, we're doing this. They're all words, and we all know, actions speak louder than words. And I think that's what NOF has done really well, is actually use their actions to show how collaborative, how things have been co-produced. Has that been really difficult in terms of the development of how this research project has gone over the time that you've spent on it? Because I imagine as you begin, like you were saying, you have an idea, you have an outline, you have your priorities and your goals on what you need to achieve as a research team. But then when you start talking to the sector, when you start getting that co-production, that collaborative working going, do they come in and just mess it all up and say, actually, no, we don't want to do that, we want to do it this way? And how do you accommodate that while still retaining the actual priority that you're there to do?
Yeah, it's a difficult space as a researcher, because you go in thinking, okay, here's my hypothesis, here's my method, these are going to be our results. I'm going to write this up in a nice, pretty paper, and we're going to publish it and talk about it, kind of widely. We generally went into this not knowing where we would end up. There was no preconceptions going into any of the workshops or the analysis of what we were going to find. And so I guess we listened to them and can talk more about the specifics of that, to then go on a journey. I guess we didn't know where the end, well, we're not even at the end yet, where our next kind of direction will be.
The project from the original research has now grown into such a multifaceted whole project, and there's multi-layers. So now that everybody gets an opportunity to take a section and run with it. So we've got all the research and that academic work happening with ARU. We've got the early years sector doing the award scheme. We've got commissioning of other resources. We're looking at parent engagement. We're doing all sorts, and that's what's it's now huge. But having so many people really involved in this team and the wider team just makes it possible, because we couldn't possibly do a fraction of what we're doing if it wasn't for having such amazing people involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stacey touched upon this earlier in terms of something that she found really powerful from the research through the photos. Can you explain a bit more in terms of what the photo element of the research was and what that means?
Yes, sure. So as I mentioned before, we had multiple methods. So we started off with a survey. Now, when I say a survey, that was 45 questions, which was a huge task to ask the settings, to spend that much time talking to us in that much depth. That was great because it created the data for us. It really gave us an idea of proportions and percentages and who does what and those sorts of things. What we wanted was to really see what practice looked like, see what food looked like. And you can never do that in a survey. We have fabulous quotes. We've got lots of things that people told us and that they were talking about. So we had the written words, we had the stories, we had the data and the percentages. But we also wanted to have a visual representation of what food looks like for children. Not understanding at that time how powerful that would be, and I will be quite blasé about it. We kind of said, "Oh, let's collect a few photos, see what food looks like on the plate," and that was how we kind of positioned it with people. When we did the workshops, we just kind of asked them if they would mind taking some photos of the food that their children were eating. Right. Now, the important thing here, I think, is, which is another thing that's quite unique to the early years, is it's important that you remember that they have these existing skills. So early years educators, they are documenting practice, they are observing children, they're writing reports for parents, they are already have developed a lot of the types of skills that you need to be a researcher. We know that, and so it depends how you kind of explain that. They wouldn't necessarily describe themselves as researchers, but the things that they're doing are very, very similar, and we know that from where we've been working in the sector. So we knew that they were capable of it. We knew that they did this really every day. They take photos as part of their observation, and so we were drawing on an existing practice and an existing skill that we knew that they already had. To just ask them to collect a few photos. And the premise of it really was, at lunchtime, could you take photos of children's lunch boxes, of the food that's served either by the caterers or yourselves? But there's a really important ethical dimension to this, especially as you mentioned, I think Susie mentioned before, food is very emotional. There are, everyone has an opinion about food. Food is built and embedded into our cultures and our traditions. It's a fundamental part of something that we do every day. And so you can't just start to shove a camera in front of children's faces and take photos of their lunchboxes and things. It needed to be something that was really well designed. And there were quite a few settings that included the children in doing that. They made it a part of an activity and they gave the cameras to the children, and the children were all involved and took photos of their own lunchboxes and their plates. And, it became a real thing that everyone was able to engage with. Some of the settings really had some fun with it. And so the outcome of that was that we collected 749 photos from 55 settings, and that was across the different types as well, childminders, day nurseries and preschools. So it really gave us an insight into packed lunches as well as setting provided meals.
A lot, Lucy, submitted fantastic photos of their food education activities. I think they were some of my favourites when looking through them all. They are delivering such amazing practice that we knew kind of anecdotally settings cook with children, they grow food, but to see those photos of, they had images of the Eat Well plate, they were kind of categorising food groups, they were doing, like I say, cooking sessions, had little allotments in the gardens. We've got a whole bank of those photos of best practice. So again, when thinking about next steps and improvement, they are the best practice examples, not what we are telling the sector to do. Mm-hmm. They're already doing them. So we hope through the photos and through the research, we can continue to celebrate that best practice and share between other settings, because I think they think it's normal, but it's incredible the difference that they're making and what that then leads to with children's health from that food and nutrition education. So they were really great and quite innovative photos to have submitted as well. And they've just been so powerful. We've brought the photos and brought them in Parliament, we've brought them to conferences, we've brought them back to settings, MPs have seen them, and they've been such an amazing asset to have to tell the story of both fantastic things, but also some really sad and challenging matters out there and some lunchboxes that are causing harm and are ultra processed, but it just shows the reality of how hard it is to have a healthy diet and how hard it is to food is complex, it's brightly coloured, it's loud, there's a lot going on. So yeah, they've just been really good to highlight the reality of how complex food is as well.
I think it's a really important way of communicating your research, isn't it? And when we think about, and touching upon what Michelle said earlier about you may not have a strength in one area, but can you access something in another area? And I think we know how adverts work, we know how they play on our emotions and how visual things, videos and images and things like that can be used. And I think it's really key. A key part of this project is demonstrating, not just in a report, not just with statistics, but actually giving that visual of this is what it looks like. And I came to the NOF conference in March, and the picture display, I don't know what else to call it, it was like fully immersive, wasn't it? You kind of walked through it and all the pictures were kind of hanging around, and I remember standing in the middle and just being in awe and looking around and feeling such a mix of emotions. Of one moment I'm laughing because I'm actually reminiscing over, I remember I had those in my lunchbox 20 years ago, and then turning around and feeling sad because I'm seeing a different portrayal of another child's lunchbox. And just, it was a really emotive, powerful way to speak about an aspect of the data that you're collecting. I think that was a really clever way of doing it. And I know Stacey touched upon that being one of the most kind of powerful things that came out of this research. So I think it was really cleverly done. Are people able to go somewhere? Are they on the website? Can people have a look at some of these photos somewhere?
Some of them are, Lucy. So if they go to the Nourishing Our Future website, so www.nourishingourfuture.co.uk, there are some photos on there. There's also the conference report that you can download, and there's photos everywhere in every document. There's also videos and things that people can watch. I would like to add as well, the photos. So this is the beauty of research when it evolves, so you don't really know what's going to happen. The photos were good provocations. They enabled people to start to tell stories and the backgrounds behind it, and it was an important challenge, and it continues to be an important challenge for everybody, because you can't take photos on face value. And we had a lot of people telling us the stories behind what you might consider to be a less nutritious packed lunch, for example. But actually that's what helped us to evolve, to start to look at the wider food environment, to start to look at this environment that parents were trying to navigate. We know that you walk into a supermarket and the special offers are always on the processed high sugar foods, and when it comes to the healthy foods, they're really expensive. There was a lot of other factors that we were able to then start looking at because of the photos, and so they were powerful to also signpost us to those different areas of the world that we live in that we need to start looking at. And that's why we started to go to the Houses of Parliament, start to contribute to other companies and organisations' research and reports, because it's a wider issue than just food in early year settings. That the early year settings are at the heart of this wider food environment, and there's a lot of joined up challenges that we need to look at there.
Some of the other things from the photos that came out was the packed lunch or the cooked meal or whatever that was on a sheet of A4, so we could get a real sense of size, and we knew it for each age. So each area that was sent in as the IDEC code. So we've really been able to drill down as well what's going on in areas, but also like Kay was saying, it actually highlighted to us, there's pictures I couldn't, that people were providing more lunch for a 1-year-old than I would eat myself. But there's stories behind that. And by having the NOF gallery, which I agree, Lucy, was so powerful when I stood there listening to people as they immersed themselves, talking, and it was, really emotive. So I do recommend people go on to our conference report and read that and look at the website, because you can see for yourself. But just things like portion sizes, the amount of packaging, even questions around being misled, what's actually the content inside some of these ultra processed foods. So it ended up snowballing a little bit. I never even considered that at the start. I never expected to get 749 photos, and to then actually get 507 depicting lunchboxes of those ages from 1 through till 4. we've got it broken down on each age. Also, then those remaining photos that Emily was saying about, the 242 pictures of good practice and things that are happening, it was just amazing, honestly. So, and people being able to see that and experiencing it, and like you say, we can still use them. And I think that really helped with then using the surveys and having the interviews helped really, shape. And I think that's another reason why NOF's been so powerful. I totally recommend it. It wasn't something that I'd been familiar with before, but it was so powerful.
And being absolutely amazed by the number of photos we got as well. I think it goes back to your point, Stacey, about the element of using pictures, cameras, the kind of playful element that brought as a methodology, which for me, I think that is why we are where we are in terms of the volume that we got. And I think it's then looking at those photos that we've got, but it's also thinking about that interaction between peers learning from one another's, the whole concept around portion size and what's there. And whilst that gave us that, it was so important we had these different variety of methods that we would use in the surveys, the workshops, to actually capture some of the qualitative annotations behind the meanings of those photos as well. But also speaking with some of the parents and actually thinking about motivations of, if you've got a child that maybe is considered to be a fussy eater, or you're struggling to get your child to consume food, some of the desperations that parents and childcare settings are facing. And I think that has led, as Kay rightly said, into terms of the snowball effect of thinking about having real powerful influence in terms of further policy development and practical change where we need that change, so that all stakeholders involved fully equipped with the support to ensure that we are nourishing our early years in terms of that future lifelong development.
And going back to what you're saying, Mitchell, it's so important, because we started this knowing the data around obesity and tooth decay. For me, anything that we're doing as a team that's going to help support people's understanding and why and how we can tackle that, in a supportive way. I think those photos really highlighted to us, what can be in children's lunchboxes. So, again, we had that start, we know that the research is out there, and, like Emily said, they had their task in the first place of why they needed to find out information. So not only did we find out what we found out, we found out a whole lot more as well. And that's what's really helped take this forward. And then it's thinking about what direction it does go. And again, we don't decide that in isolation. We go out and ask people how best is it to proceed. And in the meantime, the Department of Education did launch its early years nutritional guidance, which the timing, again, we didn't even know that when we started off, but then it's been interesting to look at that and see how it can help shape, because in a world where we've got access to things online, it can be so overwhelming and confusing for professionals and practitioners, and I think about then as a parent, where do you start? How do you know things are credible? How do you know things are accurate? So anything that we can do that supports that, I'm so privileged and proud to be part of.
It's probably worth talking about some of the results and the outcomes that we got from the photos as well. Just to share that, I've actually been working on it for this last week for a publication that we're doing. And one of the things that I was reminded of looking at the lunch boxes is kind of the volume of ultra processed foods that exist within the lunch boxes. And this isn't to demonize parents or settings, but why are you choosing this? Because it's a bigger problem. I think 97% of lunch boxes contained at least one ultra processed food across, I think there was 400 lunch boxes that we analysed. And this wasn't there wasn't a huge difference between the type of setting or the age or the IDACI either, in terms of the social deprivation scale as well. So this is a kind of a broader picture that gives an idea of the environment that the parents and settings find themselves in when they're going to the supermarket. The food that's there is typically processed and maybe more accessible. And this isn't to say that all UPFs are bad or they're not all the same. Some nutritionally can provide nutrients that are needed, that are fortified, such as vitamin D, for example. But there is there were questions that were raised in terms of the supermarket and the environment they went into. And I think Mitzi did some analysis on the baby foods as well, which was super interesting to hear.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was really interesting to break it all down. We had so many photos, and breaking it down into different setting types, IDACI, levels of deprivation, and of course the baby food pouches. I think from the lunch boxes, we found that 69% of children from preschools bring in a packed lunch, and we published the preschool briefing report as well, and obviously went on to talk about it on bigger platforms. I know Kay was featured on the BBC Look East programme as well, just highlighting the issues that preschools face, because setting types face different challenges. But I think with preschools, primarily from this research, we got the most photos from preschools, and it can be argued that they can experience further challenges due to obviously not having the facilities available, like sort of other types of settings. And then building on the baby pouches, we were finding that even in these preschool lunch boxes, children were still bringing in baby pouches instead of whole fruits. So I think that's where our later work has come in with Tasted, who are now working with us to really, with the whole fruits and get children used to eating real fruit as opposed to puree fruit, because that's sort of what they look at as their fruit. It was really interesting, all the photos. But yeah, it's found a lot, and it's been interesting to break it down. It's still ongoing at the moment. As Sandra said, there's so much to analyse. So that's what's happening at the moment with the photos.
It's funny, isn't it? I think you come into a project like this and you think, right, I've just got to do this, this and this, and then that's it, all tied up nicely in a bow, done, dusted. And then you start, and I mean, I can't even take in all of the different things that you've uncovered. Like it sounds like it's just been a constant discovery of so many different things. And this is so much more complex than just looking at a lunchbox, and I think on the surface, people could be guilty of looking at it and going, oh yeah, we're just having a look at what children are eating in the settings and that's it. But there are so many layers to this research, and there are so many things to consider, even down to like what you're mentioning about the baby pouches. And it's hard for parents to know what is inside food. I think we're in a day and age now where manufacturers are so clever with designing things in a way where you don't really know what's inside, and even if you read it back to front and inside out, sometimes you're still just as confused as before you started because you don't understand what's in it. And I know there's been a lot of work around kind of what is and isn't allowed to be on packaging and things like that, but it's still very much a struggle for parents. And if parents aren't educated in a way and supported in a way to understand that, then this comes out in going with what they can grab, what they do understand, what is perceived in the media and in their own circles and friends and family and things, and what's the norm. And I guess that will feed into looking at different variables like social economic background and things like that will feed into that. So I can tell already that this is such a complex thing, but I think you're doing really well as a team of making it really accessible, making it really easy to understand, and making it so that parents can look at it and understand a bit more. But to break it down a little bit easier, you did identify 6 key themes as you did this project. Could you walk us through what these kind of main themes are as a bit of an overview?
Yes, I can. So 6 themes, and I think they'll encapsulate a lot of this, because like you quite rightly say, this is really, really complex. So one of the things was around requirements and guidance, and this talks to what Stacey mentioned earlier around there is so much out there, but also there's not enough out there. So there isn't the right guidance out there. There isn't anything that is really clear that says to parents or says to educators, this is your parameters, these are your boundaries, this is how to help children. There are a lot of organisations, First Steps Nutrition, Tasted, who do loads and loads of really great work, and they produce really informational informative guidance for parents and for early years settings. But for an early years setting that is open from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, there's a whole team of staff. How do you keep on top of all of this stuff? When do you find the time to read it? What, you know, how do you apply it and challenge it and question it and work out what the challenges are around and come back to it and review it and reflect on it? So the guidance that's out there, the guidance from the DfE is your usual type of policy guidance where it tells you what to do but not how to do it, and so that puts the responsibility on the settings of them being able to think about how they are going to implement and meet this guidance. So there are lots and lots of challenges around the type of guidance, how informational it is, how supportive it is, and settings are calling for resources, guidance that's really clear for them, but that's also targeted. Early years is a crucial time for children who are learning about food. They're developing schematically. There is a lot going on for children. They're developing hormonally, emotionally. You know, their engagement with food is not just about eating and staying alive. Their engagement with food is about learning the textures, it's about feeling comfortable with it, what it means to them culturally as well. So it's a really complex topic to provide guidance and resources and support around. So that's one thing that we're looking at. Nutrition and portion size, again, these all kind of overlink as well. There is a real need for training and education around nutrition for early years educators and for parents. It's not really even in the curriculum unless you take it as a GCSE option. You don't really learn these life skills of how much you should be eating, what you should be eating. The more broader food environment, so that was the third kind of category that we looked at, is what does food look like in the wider environment? What are the challenges and the facilities that preschools and day nurseries and childminders are operating in? As we said, they work in very different types of settings, and so they need different things. The inclusivity around food, so the greatest challenge that all settings experienced were with children's preferences. So children who may have special educational needs and disabilities, food is a core part of that for them. They have specific requirements, and it might not fit within your traditional views of what is a healthy and nutritious meal. So there is a lot to do around helping children to develop positive relationships with food, to give them that wide variety of experiences with food, and to support children who have allergies, intolerances. And we're seeing more and more and more of that in the early years, which will clearly be linked to what is in the food now. And then the last two were food education, so not just about what children are eating and what we know about that, but also how we are breaking this cycle, how we are starting to educate youngest children so that they can grow and develop understanding what food looks like, where does it come from. It doesn't come out of a packet with a cartoon character on it, comes out of a field or an animal, or, you know, and there are many settings that have got chickens and that are working on farms, and, you know, really helping children understand where food comes from and what it looks like. And then finally, sustainable food, so looking at excess food packaging, food waste. The primary reason that settings struggle to provide lots of different experiences for children to try new foods is that then it gets wasted. So it's expensive to be able to offer food for children. There is no funding for food in the early years. Settings aren't allowed to charge beyond a voluntary contribution for food in the early years. So food is provided to children essentially for free. And so the stresses and the pressures around food waste is a growing concern among settings.
I love the whole kind of education side of what you're doing as well, because I think you're right. I think it's really important that we teach children from a young age to understand about food. Like I turned 40 this year and I still don't understand food and nutrition. You know, if you ask my family, and it's a bit of a running joke, portion size with me, I have no concept of portion size. I'm just like, the bigger the better, and that's not the best way to be, but I don't know how else to be in that front. Food is definitely my love language. I'd rather just like feed, and then if you don't want to eat it all, don't eat it all. But then it's that, because both myself and my daughter are autistic, and we have that kind of inability to realize when we're full, that introception type thing we struggle with. So it's all well and good saying, you don't have to eat it all, but actually I like a clean plate, so I will eat everything that you put on my plate. So it comes back to that education and that learning and that support, and the earlier we can embed those habits in our families, in our young people, the more that it will lead on and then feed on to their children and their families and go on forth. And I think I've always championed having more life skill development in schools, and it's something that I think is really missing and really needed. And I do a lot of work with home educating families, and that's something that they also implement very heavily within their home learning. But I feel like it's very focused towards schools and beyond. We kind of forget that actually there's a whole education section of early years where children are learning and are capable of learning at that young age, that we kind of forget about because we say, oh yes, well, we'll implement it in the curriculum from primary school onwards. Well, it's too late. We've missed the opportunity to teach some really key core skills at that early years stage. It's all relative to age and everything like that, but you're clearly demonstrating that there are things that our early years children can learn and embed habit-wise from that early age. So do you think more needs to be done, and is NOF feeding into what needs to be done in terms of that education and support from that early age?
Definitely, Lucy. And I think, as Stacey mentioned earlier, the new Department for Education guidance for early years settings on food and nutrition, it's the first time that's ever been launched. So it was developed in May last year and was semi-mandatory for settings to implement from September. So that's a really positive step where the DofE have committed to, look, we're saying food and nutrition is important in the early years, and there's some suggestions for how they implement that. So they introduce food education, they teach about portion sizes. So that's a great commitment. But as Kay said, there aren't many resources for how they do that. So that's something that since last summer, we've been working really hard as a team to produce new resources, work with experts to develop training and toolkits and templates for settings and for parents to not only implement that guidance, but also to understand food and nutrition and know how to teach that in practice. So last summer, in response to the NOF research, we worked with the sector to develop the first Essex Early Years NOF Award. So that was one of the recommendations from the research in a few of the different themes of settings wanting support, guidance, resources. Then the DofE launched the guidance. So it was such good timing for us to make an Essex something to help settings to do exactly that. Food education, working with the children. So we spent the summer working together, working with settings to come up with, at the time, we went through lots of different names about what it could be called. It started with the healthy eating framework. We had about 7 different names on the go. And then we launched with the NOF Award, where it's 3 different levels of different actions in each level that settings can undertake to deliver the guidance, but also to build on what they're already doing in the most part. And many of those actions include food education activities, training for the staff as well. So there's 3 different levels: rooting, sprouting and blooming, with clear actions for the settings to follow to achieve their awards, but also most importantly with a suite of resources for them. And we've worked with different experts and different organisations to make these resources. So we've worked with a registered nutritionist, Laura Matthews, to make different templates and toolkits and documents. We've worked with Catherine Lip and Nursery Kitchen to make training videos. And so exactly as you said, Lucy, how are we meant to know what a macronutrient is or what a portion size should be? So Catherine's made lots of different videos for early years educators there's one on portion sizes, there's one on food groups, one on how to write a nutrition policy, lots of different bite-sized topics. And we've also worked with Charlotte Sterling-Reed to make those same resources, but for families and parents and carers, as we can't kind of support one group without the other. So we've been busy doing that in the last few months, and we launched that in September. So at least Essex settings have got some support and some resources to do all of this stuff, and they continue to make new resources. So we're keen that they produce their own toolkits and their own templates to share with the others as well as they progress through that award.
I think that the fact that in the resource production so far we're acknowledging the support that's needed there for early years providers as well as parents. Because I think, going back to the point that Stacey made at the start of today about the historical perspective, a lot of parents today are not in a position where we're in a society where a lot of parents are stay-at-home mums, so people's lifestyles are changing, there's cultural dynamics, there's working dynamics, and I think that whole collaborative need for the resource development is really important in terms of something, a phrase that I'm very passionate and use a lot is people don't know what they don't know. And I learned certain skills around cooking and food and cooking from scratch and things like that from my elderly grandparents and things like that. And we're losing sight of that in terms of those lived experiences, maybe. So by introducing these kind of interactions and sensory awareness, as the work we've tasted is doing within children's, and some of these excellent examples that we've seen from some of the feedback we've received from settings, I think what we're starting to see is that the earlier we introduce these concepts that food is not just a commodity we eat, and there's these broader aspects to it, it then enables our younger children to also be teaching and educating and going home and sharing what they've learned. Because for many children, I think, Kay, you alluded to this, nutrition's not mandatory within curriculum. And even when it is offered as a GCSE, if there aren't enough students to take that, it quite often doesn't run as an option, and it's often only built in very briefly within subject matters such as biology, where they'll talk a little bit about nutrition and cooking and things like that. So the earlier we bring this in, it's about the future education of our younger generations to also reinforce that in some of our older generations as well.
And I think, Lucy, just to add some context, so we know that the first 5 years of life are the most important, and arguably pre-conception too. And so children are forming their habits with food before they start school. By the time they start school, it's almost too late. You know, you can make a proportion of a difference, but it's the first 5 years of a child's life where they are starting to understand and experience what food is. The data is showing us that 1 in 5 children are already living with obesity or overweight at the age of 5 before they start primary school. So the importance of looking at what the food environment looks like for children in the early years will really start to help those longer term health outcomes for children. 14% of children are also experiencing tooth decay before they've started school. And so this is, you know, their first baby teeth. The main reason for children to go to hospital these days is to have their rotting teeth removed. And that is a horrendous statistic that, you know, the nation should be behind, and we should be really looking at how we support children. And so the fact that this research project and what we're talking about today is situated in the early years is really significant, because we need to start to tackle it there.
If I could just add as well, Michelle Wisby's not able to join us today, but is part of the research team, and she's played a really significant role as well, because as well as working at Anglia Ruskin University, she is also an owner of some Montessori nurseries in Essex. So we've got the advantage of her being involved, but also being able to work with her staff and her families. And she's also doing work with so we're looking at, you know, 1 to 5. Sandro has shared he's had a baby, he's been involved from a baby point of view. Michelle's also doing work now, you know, for pre-birth and calling it the 4th trimester with the Montessori world that she's involved in. So, you know, I think it's really important, like Kay says, that it is pre-birth, you know, and it's whilst we're on this journey with the research, there's so much more that can be done as well. And it's so important for when those children are forming their taste, their habits and weaning and all of those points as well. It's so important to get it then, you know. So this is just the start of something like, you know, we're a year and a half in and the time's flown past, but there's so much that can be achieved. It's really important that we do that. to reduce those levels of obesity, to look at, children having healthy teeth. And, that does go back to like the sugar content that children are receiving, and, how they see an apple and what that looks like. And, so, we're in this together. And what's been amazing about this project is there's no judgment, there's no shame, it really is just open, honest, and what can we do, and I learn all the time. It's been like just even going into the supermarket now with a fresh pair of eyes and looking at how things are marketed has been interesting. And I think that really came out in our conference again with that photo capture and the amount of waste, so that our 6 recommendations are so interlinked. And that's why these NOF awards, I feel so passionate that there's an output, and that I want every setting in Essex to be signed up to it, to showcase the good work and to develop, because it's not just about the practitioners and people working with the children, it's about parents being on board, it's about children shaping it as well, and getting that feedback from children and getting those opportunities. And we'll carry on banging for that funding in early years. It needs to be there like it is for primary age children, but until we get to that point, there's work that we can all be doing. So if you're listening to this podcast, please share, go wide, whatever you can do to get the message out there to our families, our children, our communities. We all play a role. It takes all of us to shape a community.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. And if someone is listening so to be involved in the NOF award, you don't have to have been involved in the research, is that right?
No.
So any setting can contact you and say, I want to get involved in this.
Yeah, any early years setting in Essex. So if you're a preschool, if you're a day nursery, if you're a childminder, whoever you are, we would love to work with you on the NOF awards. The 3 levels are meant to be kind of a step up. So the first routing is very introductory. You'll be doing most of it anyway. It's like, have you got a nutrition lead? Have you looked at the EYFS guidance? Are you delivering food education with children? There's 10 different actions, and we can pop a link for, we've got a little toolkit and a video that explains all of it in more information. And it has to be an Essex setting. So you have to be working in one of the 12 districts in Essex. So if you're listening, get subscribed to the NOF Award page on your Education Essex Online. So the platform that you see all your early years stuff already from Essex County Council. There's a whole NOF Award page that explains what you have to do, what the criteria are, and it's completely your journey. You do it in the time that you'd like to, and there's no kind of deadline that you have to do it by. It was made kind of by you, for you. So use it as you wish and as you find helpful, and tell us what more you'd like. Are the videos working for you? Are the templates? If not, what more would you like? What have we missed? What else could we be producing or creating to help you, not only through the awards, but also to improve this practice in your setting? So we really want it to work for you, as we know you're all so different. Some of you do your own food, some of you have got caterers, some of you have got lunch boxes. You all work very differently. So we want this to work for any type of setting in Essex, and for other areas to learn from it as well. So other councils, other settings in other areas of the country. If DV and Oxford you're listening, hopefully this is a good example piece for what works in practice for other areas to learn from as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I said, anybody listening who's not in Essex, go to your local council and challenge them. Say, like, what are you doing about this? Food is so important. We need help. So they can reach out.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my next questions, was asking, like, what is the scope to make this bigger? Obviously, we are in Essex contained with it at the moment. Are there plans to roll it out wider? Are there kind of next steps in the pipeline? Not that I'm trying to add to your workload or anything like this, but this sounds like something that could be really good rolled out nationally and a lot wider.
Yeah, we are promoting it, Lucy, as much as we can. So we're running webinars about the scheme. We're sharing all the like the toolkit, the video, all of our learning to date. We want to share with as many councils and as many areas as possible. So yes, we are spreading the word. And we ran a webinar with the local government association last year. I don't know if you can find it on recording, but I'll find out. We wrote a case study as well. So we're trying to share as much as we can with other areas, so that they can use it for their areas and they can consider making their own. So I think that's what's worked so well. This has been developed from an Essex evidence base from the sector, and they've been a part of producing it with us. And so that's why I think it has worked and has had such good uptake. In only 2 or 3 months since launch, we've got 90 settings that are already working towards it. They support 4,300 children across the county. 20 settings have already got their Rooting Award. But I think because they were behind it from the start, and that can't immediately be lifted and shifted in other areas if the sector aren't bought in and they don't believe in the value of it, if that makes sense. So absolutely applicable in other areas. Share away, but really work with your local sector to find something that works for your community and your county or district or borough would be my biggest advice.
There's definitely national learning to take from this. So, of course, there's opportunities where we need to be able to create that positive food environment for all families and children in their early years, irrespective even whether it's in settings. This is a societal challenge that we need to be able to develop. And we have made some really good steps. I think it's quite it's quite in the headlines at the moment. And there was the new legislation that has come in around advertising before the watershed. There's legislation that's coming in around baby food. So we're starting to see some of those small changes, but it is going to take ongoing research, scalability of understanding this challenge for children and families, and early years educators as well.
Yeah. Thinking about where you're at the moment, because I know that this is an ongoing thing and you've got lots and lots planned moving forward, but thinking about where you're currently at with NOF and thinking back to where you started, is there kind of an example that you can share from a particular setting or experience where you can kind of demonstrate the growth that's happened for somebody who's been involved in this process?
Yes, so I can think it has been many settings have been in touch since and have shown their good practice. And the other month we had an exciting opportunity where a setting in Harwich went to the Houses of Parliament with the team and they presented their case study and what they've been doing. They've been doing lots of good practice. We've seen a couple of settings, and this Harwich one in particular, who have created like a NOF companion, like a baking bear or a chef bear that gets sent home with the children with like recipe ideas and cupcakes, like just those natural ingredients that perhaps families are not able to provide or don't know, the recipes. So it's just all about education, and these settings have really embraced the partnership working with parents and children, and the joined up working has been great. We've got another opportunity coming up where another setting is going to present, what they've been doing since NOF, at an APPG event. So that's going to be really exciting for the setting and giving these settings the opportunity to showcase what they're doing on a big platform, because this is sort of a big thing for them. It's not often that they're invited to do things like this, and having their voices present at these events, I think, shows the lived experiences and comes across really authentic and captures the audience. But it's been amazing, and settings continue to get in touch and share their practices. The social media, we've had settings sharing what they're doing, tagging us in their practice and photos. So it's been really inspiring, and our Facebook group has been created, and we encourage the settings to really share on there what they are doing, get involved in discussions. We post things about updates, how they can get involved further. And I think it's evident that how many have signed up to the NOF Award already, they're invested, they're continuing to strive and make a difference for their children and families. So it's been really interesting.
I was going to add as well about some people's attitudes towards food have changed. I was speaking to a childminder back at our NOF conference who said for 12 years she has opened up lunchboxes and put it in front of the children, never once stopping to think about what they were consuming. She was just like, there's the food, parents provided, that's it. And now it's that level of just going, oh, actually, this is all ultra processed, and having those conversations with parents to go, oh, maybe you could think about, an alternate swap here. At the NHS do that. There's an app you can scan items and they will suggest an alternative to swap, a food swap app. And they're able to highlight that to parents to say, next time you're shopping, maybe think about a little less chocolate. And then another setting I was talking to, they were part of the Fair Share scheme, which is a supermarket scheme where they give the slightly out of date food. There's still good food, but the slightly out of date food to local charities. And I think lots of settings get involved in this as a great way of sort of getting food, because as I said, there's no funding for food, so any freebies they can get is great. But unfortunately, what they were ending up with was an awful lot of the pastries, because that tends to be what supermarkets throw out. It's a lot of donuts, a lot of biscuits, those fresh baked goods. And initially they were like, oh, well, free food is free food. And now they're like, and they wouldn't necessarily serve it in the setting, but they'd leave it out for the parents to take. And quite often that's what the child's breakfast would be. And now they're like, oh, well, actually, empty calories, is probably just empty calories. So now they take the fresh fruit, the fresh vegetables, they make smoothies. They're really thinking about what it is they're promoting at their setting. So I think that sort of food attitude has been a great one.
We had another setting, Lucy, and this setting has actually just been awarded their Routing Award for the NOF Award by their local MP, and their head of curriculum was in a podcast, a national podcast run by the Food Foundation on early years nutrition, and the only setting representative alongside other kind of national experts in this space, and was just amazing. So that's what I've loved seeing, the settings shouting loudly and proudly and sharing their voices in these strategic and policy type forums. I think that's been really great to see.
It must feel like parental proudness for you as a team. Like, you teach all of this and you share this information, then they go away, and then when they come back and they share it, and it must be that really proud moment of, look how much they've grown and understood and taken it. And it sounds like a lot of the settings are not just taking the information that they've got, but they're developing it, and it's merging and growing into what works for their setting, and then they're sharing it wider, and then they'll tell another setting, and then so you've kind of started the ball rolling, but they've taken it and they've grown it and they've made it go wider. And I think that's where it really hits, isn't it? That's where you see the real momentum and the real growth with something, is when it stops being such a top down of, this is what we've found, this is what you need to do, but actually it becomes that ecosystem of sharing and learning and growing together as a field. So I think that's amazing. What's the next steps for NOF? Where are we going next? What can we expect to see from you in the next 6 months, 12 months?
Well, I'm going to start us off by saying sign up for the conference in March. So we are so excited to be able to go with our second conference, and a totally different approach this time. It's in the planning, but bringing everybody back together again and thanking them for their contribution to get to where we are. This really is a joint venture. So for me, that's going to be probably a real significant milestone of the progress that we've made. I'm going to hand over to everybody else now, because I'm sure everyone's got different things, but I kind of can't believe what we've achieved in a short time, and I can't wait to see everybody again and celebrate that. So everyone's welcome, sign up. So I'm sure Kay's be able to tell us the details of how people can sign up.
I'll pop a link as well on
Lovely.
that. It'll all go under all the links.
And it'll be a big opportunity, Stacey, I think, for the conference. Like you say, it's that opportunity to regroup again, to get all these people back in that space on that one day. But it's also that other opportunity, and as you say, a slightly different feel for the conference this year, of their voices dominating the conference. And that I feel will be really powerful, to kind of feel like we have gone full circle with where they maybe felt before NOF in terms of their voices being heard, and where they now feel they are in terms of that journey.
I think that sense of pride for me, Lucy, as well, is not just in what the settings are doing with food, but in this project has been able to amplify early years as a profession. So, these early years educators, they are brilliant at this stuff. They do this stuff every day. They don't have a curriculum that is prescribed to them. They are creative, innovative. It is their role to be able to educate and support children, putting the child first, looking at the environment that they're living in, working out what is important to them, and helping them to work through their areas of learning and development. And so the early years sector in Essex have really showcased how they do that under the guise of this research of food. And I think that the way it's very empowering to be able to show that the early years sector are not just babysitters. They are not just changing nappies and wiping noses every day. There is so much more to it than that. And they are creating the foundations for children's school readiness. And these are the important aspects of what we're able to showcase through this research. One of the next steps for us is we are very privileged to be continuing to work with M&E and to work with a second company as well. Sanjoy, you can say more about that one. We're going to grow the NOF team. So we have an opportunity out at the moment for 2 people to join us to do a PhD with us. So we'll have 2 separate parts of the research going on. One looking at engagement and how you build a model of public health initiatives and engagement across the early years, and also looking at all of those settings that haven't engaged yet, and why not? Why didn't we reach out to them? What is it that they need? What are the barriers and the challenges? What are the reasons why they are not engaging in this? And sometimes that can just be communication, and sometimes that can be lots of different reasons. So we're gonna explore that. Sanjoy, I'll hand over to you to talk about the other PhD opportunity that we have.
So the second PhD is supported by the Fishmongers company, and they've got a fisheries trust, and they support activities to increase kind of fish consumption from a public health perspective. So we'll be working with them to look at how we can incorporate fish into the diet of early years, particularly working with settings to help them to do that with the meals that they provide. Fish is something that is nationally underconsumed at every single point in life, from early years through to old age, and it's really critical for the things like cognitive development in early years, cardiovascular health as well, and it's a good source of protein, but it's often something that's ignored. So the idea will be to work with families, settings, children, and also the seafood industry as well, to look at ways in which we can co-produce some resources and guidance on how we can increase fish intake overall, which I think could be really excited and needed as well. And also looking at it from a sustainability angle as well, because fish is not only nutritional, we need to make sure we're consuming fish that is sustainably sourced too. And I guess the other thing to highlight is that we're also creating an app working with Health Innovation East, who are the NHS innovation arm. And so we're creating minimal viable products, like a basic prototype of what an app can do. And the process after that is looking for funding to grow and develop that, so an app that settings can use to improve healthy eating when they're working.
I think everybody's going to have a different thing that they're going to do next year. Because I work directly with the early years sector, for me, it's about the growth of that award. So I said we've got 90 settings completing routing or scientist routing, and so how we keep going, how we get more on board. That first level is designed deliberately to align with the EYFS guidelines around food. So we want almost every setting in Essex to achieve that first level, would be the ambition, and then to move on to that sprouting and to those bloomings, and to go up 3, so they're really confident in their food preparation and food delivery and food provision. And then aside from that, the rollout of the taste ed, which is that food sensory training, is really, really exciting. I think that's going to have such a difference to how children see food, how settings help children to develop their preferences and their habits. And I think I'm really excited about the rollout of the taste ed. I think Emily can tell you more about it, but that's the bit for me that I think is going to make such a difference.
Yeah, I think we all are Taste Ed's biggest fans. We love it. So they're a national charity, Lucy and listeners, that deliver sensory food education training. It's life changing. I think I've got an okay diet. Like, I've obviously learnt about it. I like it, but I've got sensory challenges with it, and it teaches you to expose yourself to each sense. So their key motto is you don't have to try food and you don't have to like it, but expose yourself to the senses. So each lesson is on a different sense. So yeah, the 5 individual ones, and it's very experiential. It's very patient with you. So the sight one is just you're looking, what does it look like? Are there key shapes in that fruit or veg? Does it look funny? And you really explain that. The same when you listen, put a blindfold on and you really immerse yourself in that sense. And it just has had phenomenal impact. We've worked with them as a pilot in the last few months with just 12 settings across the county, just to see what worked, what elements of the training worked, what didn't, what more could be of benefit for the settings, because Tayson have done a lot of work in schools and some early years settings, but not all of the types. So childminders was a really key group that we worked with in the pilot. So as Susie said, we're looking forward to working with them on a larger scale this year with more settings, but also creating more resources. So specifically, some resources tailored to neurodiversity. So that'll be really exciting. Some resources for parents. I think they have got fantastic publicly available resources anyway on their website. So listeners, do have a look and try out some of the fact sheets and lessons. Even you can do them at home. You can do some of the exercises at home with your children, but we'll have more resources coming your way from Tasted. I think my highlight, or something I'm looking forward to as a next step, will be more parent care and family engagement. So as I mentioned, we've made some great resources and with other experts for settings, and we've started to develop some for families. But a next chapter will be creating even more resources for parents and families. So I think that will be really beneficial. And we're really privileged to work with so many amazing people in this space within and beyond Essex. So I'm looking forward to working with more of those partners to create more training, more webinars. We're thinking about a parent webinar on nutrition with Charlotte later in the year. So that'll be one to look out for. And yeah, I could probably sit here all day and talk about our next steps, Lucy, but there's a few.
It's crazy. I knew that when I asked the question about next steps, it would be like a million and one things. And I love that, because the ambition for this just keeps growing and growing and reacting to the need that is coming out of it. So that's fantastic. I feel like you need another 40 members of your team, though, to achieve steps. But it sounds incredible. I'm going to leave the last word with you guys. And I'm just going to ask you in just one sentence, what does Nourishing Our Future mean to you?
I don't mind going first. So Nourishing Our Future for me is about creating positive relationships with food for children. So that includes role modelling. I think that there is a real responsibility that we have as adults to role model and to recognise and to talk to children about food. And we really need to put it at the heart of early years practice.
That was amazing, Kay. Nourishing Our Future to me means working together to celebrate and also make a difference for our early years sector, for our youngest children, their families and communities within Essex, but also beyond, nationally and internationally if we can.
I agree, Emily. You know, when we started out, we did this in a sentence, and mine was about children having that opportunity for a colourful plate, you know, getting the opportunities. But now, I feel like we've done so well in Essex. I want to see it go wider. I do want to see it, you know, across the whole country. So I shall be there with you all, guys, doing whatever we can. It's amazing.
For me, Nourishing Our Future, really, for me, summing up, is collaborative working, creates national impact. And I think that for me, that is one of the key headlines of what this research has demonstrated to date. And I have every confidence to say it will strive and reach for higher heights.
So for me, it is about optimism. It's about, I think we can make a real positive impact on children's lives by doing this. I think that there's so much hope that we can turn the tide and we can really have, as I said, such a positive impact.
I think this research project has highlighted the importance of the early years, so laying the foundations in the early years, working together in partnership with the settings, working with them rather than on them has been important as well.
I'm really not prepared for this, but For me, I guess Nourishing Our Future is the start of a movement that we're creating in terms of helping our youngest children from all walks of life have a better start, starting in Essex and hopefully going further than that as we grow.
Amazing. Michelle, Susie, Sanjoy, Emily, Mitzi, Kay and Stacey, thank you so much for coming on today and telling us about the fantastic work you're doing with Nourishing Our Future. I know that it's going to continue to grow, get bigger and take over the world. I'm sure at some point we'll be seeing NOF in all of the different countries around the world. But I feel really privileged to have been given this chance to really dig a bit deeper, find out a bit more and just hear about where it's going. So thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today. And I'll be sure to put all the links. If you send me everything that you think will be useful for everybody, I'll pop them all underneath the episode and hopefully we can get more people involved, more people talking about it. And I'm going to earmark you for 12 months time to come back on and tell us more about what you've done in those 12 months since we last spoke. So just left for me to say thank you so much for giving us your time today.
It was our pleasure. Thank you so much, Lucy.
Definitely. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.